table?
Yep.
Okay, GTV, we're ready to start. Good evening, welcome to the Goffstown Planning Board meeting. This is a regular meeting that's scheduled for this evening, Tuesday, June 9th. Normally we start with introductions at the table, and I'll start with Joanne.
Excuse me, Joanne Duffy, Planning and Economic Development Director.
Carl Adams, Select Board Representative.
Gayla Breck, alternate and recording secretary.
Tim Redmond.
Kimberly Peace.
Barbara Griffin.
Jim Raymond.
David Pierce, an alternate member.
This evening we have two regular members that are not going to be in attendance, so Gail and David will be voting on all matters. Correction and acceptance of the minutes of May 26th. Action needed.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion's been made to approve the minutes as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining, I wasn't here.
Abstain.
You got both of them? So the vote passes.
Just Tim and Barbara abstained.
Okay, we have an item that's been requested by the board at the Goffstown Public Works Department. I will ask our town engineer to come up and speak to the request for the release of a bond on John King Drive.
Scott Azana, town engineer. So the developer has asked for the release of the bond for John King Drive. DPW has done an inspection and found that everything seems kosher over there, and we're good to go to accept the road.
What was it, is a road bond?
It was the remaining 10%.
It's listed as a maintenance bond, Jim.
Oh, sorry.
It's listed as a maintenance bond that has since expired.
We had reduced it.
Excuse me?
We had reduced it previously.
So is 47 the number that's being released right now? That's what it says.
$47,813.10.
Just for clarification, it's the balance, right? The road is done and it will be accepted.
It has
I
been,
mean,
already has been accepted according to
Yeah.
the paperwork with the tracking plan.
Right.
I move that we approve the release of the remainder of the surety.
I'll second that.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of releasing the bond to Strategic Contracting, the amount of $47,813.10 plus interest, it says here, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passed. So is there anything else under action or correspondence or anything like that?
There is a letter from Mike and Susan Hillhouse that came in regarding the medical facility, but you may want to take it up at that time.
Okay, well, make sure it's entered into the record. What is the normal procedure, Joanne? Is it just entered into the record, or is it read aloud?
Do you usually read it out loud?
I'll defer to Barbara on that.
It's usually read into the, it's usually just entered into the
Entered
record.
into the record.
And the Hill Houses are here. If they have anything they'd want to say about it, they can certainly do that in public comment for that hearing.
Okay.
Question.
Barbara?
Just comment for my benefit and the benefit of the public. Joanne, is it fair to say that this letter is to make it clear that the boundary, as indicated on the plans with the survey that was done by the applicant, is disputed by the abutter?
Correct.
And the letter details some of the issues in regards to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything else on that matter before we move on? Okay, the first item on the agenda tonight is an old business item, map 30, lot 46-1. Joanne?
So this is the property that came before the board regarding the medical building that you just mentioned on Mass Road near the traffic circle, or I should say roundabout. Why did I say that? And they have made the corrections that we have asked for. They have added the changes to the plan. You have new plans before you. Let me just find my comments here. So they were asking for 3 waivers at the last, at the May 12th meeting. 2 of those waivers were approved, and the third one had to do with landscaping and screening. I went out yesterday and took some photos that should be before you of the current landscaping on the property. It's basically mature trees and bushes. It looks like it's professionally maintained, and I don't really see any need for any additional landscaping, but that's certainly up to the board.
I believe the question that was asked at the prior meeting was,
Oh, right.
is that in compliance with the previously approved site plan?
So unfortunately, the previous site plan was from many years ago, back in the 80s, and there was no landscaping indicated on the plan at that time. I
Okay.
don't think the board requested it.
Thank you.
That was in the 80s?
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Well, that's showing my age, along with the fact that,
Do you want to drop that subject at this point?
well, it all goes to show the fact that I looked at Collis's T-shirt tonight, and based on the past week that I've had, I wondered why you were wearing your EKG on your shirt. I did.
Upside down. that's
That would tell you what kind of a week I've had.
Does anybody have any questions or
Any
comments
substantive
for
questions?
staff before we proceed?
I guess the question would be, you know, it's an amendment. We're entitled to require them to bring the site into conformance, arguably. The prior site plan did not show any landscaping because it was not required. It is now. We may waive additional landscaping, but I think we'd want to do it on the condition that this landscaping be shown and maintained, so it's part of the new approval, if we're going to do that, as opposed to just saying it's fine based on the prior plan. On amendment, we can impose conditions to bring it into compliance. And I don't know if they've shown this on the plan. We've seen the pictures. But,
We can ask them when they do their
you know,
presentation.
but that would be my comment, I guess.
Board members, anything else? At this time, I'd like, Barbara?
I don't recall that there's, based on the requirements, an actual landscape plan.
I don't see one.
No, there
No,
wasn't.
that's why I'm asking.
Site layout has trees in it.
There's the, it's the sheet 3 sort of shows it, and sheet 4 shows, a couple of the sheets show it. So just as a comment, if we're gonna do that, I'm gonna want one of these sheets to show what's actually there, so that it's understood that there's an obligation to maintain, because we're famous for coming back with saying something was supposed to happen and then not having the details to know what we meant.
Anybody else? We still have time to come back if you have something else missing. Jim?
Well, I'll let David speak to this, but David, why don't you speak to it?
Barbara, you mentioned sheet 3 of 8, and which is along South Mass Street, has 2 areas of proposed snow storage,
No, I noticed that.
and currently that's part of the current landscaping, with pictures of mature shrubs.
David is too shy to point that out the first time.
Thank you for encouraging.
The taller shrubs, this is the front here along Mass Road. The taller shrubs, the
That's called a rhododendron?
rhododendron, I think they are. The taller shrubs, the rhododendrons, are at the end of each side. And then towards the middle, there's the sign with a stone wall around it and some smaller hostas. So I don't think they would be harmed by
Well, they can
snow.
address it.
Yeah.
We can hear about it.
The areas that I mentioned that are outlined for snow are vacant.
Well, I guess I'd like to have, I want that shown.
Anybody else? You ready? Okay, we'll, at this time, we'll ask the applicant to identify himself for the record and speak up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Pete Madsen. I'm a project engineer at Keach Nordstrom Associates, representing the applicant PRM RGM LLC for the current site plan application. Like you guys know, this is a plan to bring 16 more parking spaces to an existing medical office right on South Mass Street. Like you guys mentioned, 2 waivers have been approved already. The final waiver we're asking for is landscaping, like you guys discussed. I guess I will leave it up to discussion after, but if we need to show more landscaping on the plan, we are not opposed to these landscape areas. These are landscape areas, these grass islands here, they're not delineated as such, whereas this one is called out as one. We can certainly show that, we have no issue with that. Additionally, there is some arborvitae's proposed around the site to kind of aid in adding more landscaping. So, last time we were here, we got comments from you all, we got comments from the public, we had a letter from DPW that we were addressing. There are kind of some changes that we made to the plans based on all of that, and I kind of just want to run through that real quickly with you guys. So 7 things I want to discuss. The first one is the driveways and the circulation. So the first plan that we came to you guys with showed these 2 driveways being widened to 24 feet and a proposed 2-way circulation throughout the site, so both an enter and exit here and here. After hearing comments from DPW, it was kind of determined that South Mass Street is going to be under moratorium. It will be being paved this spring. It didn't really line up well with us proposing any work within the right-of-way. So we scrapped that, we went back to the 1-way circulation. We're not proposing to alter the driveways, leaving them, I believe this one's 22 feet and this one's 20 feet. The one thing we did do was switch the circulation through the site. So originally, or as the site exists today, vehicles enter from this entrance, the easternmost entrance, and circulate through the site this way. We're proposing to switch that, and the reason is because this parking up here, when this was added, this is now 2-way, and it creates a conflict. If vehicles were to enter this way and possibly drive around the site behind, there would now be a conflict. If there's 2-way traffic, people might think you can exit that way, and then you have cars head on. So that's the reason why we switched this. I also believe one of the board members brought up kind of a queuing issue as well, with this maybe being more favorable for cars to enter, and maybe they were kind of tempted to enter from this side or something, so that kind of plays into that as well. The second thing is snow storage, which you guys have discussed already a little bit. As you can see, we have the 2 snow storage areas here. They are in areas that don't have a lot of landscaping, as the pictures show. We're comfortable with what we've shown. We also have this area on the side as well. And I know one of the main concerns was what we do with all the snow when it piles up and doesn't fit here anymore. We've added note 15 on sheet 3, which discusses any plowed snow being hauled off-site and removed in accordance with all local and state federal laws.
Tim, could we ask the applicant to move the easel enough so that
sure.
abutters can see what you're pointing to?
Absolutely.
Why don't you turn it so it's right parallel to the wall?
We think
We
we
have
know
pla- we
with
have
that we are
plans.
on sheet
3 of 8.
3.
Sure, yep. And you guys have seen note 15 as well? Okay, fantastic. I know that there were some concerns, obviously, with Mr. Parkhurst here. He had some issues of snow being plowed onto his property, and also some drainage issues as well. So what we've done is we've actually graded a 2-foot berm. If you flip to sheet 4, you can see we've graded a 2-foot wide berm along his property line, and also also, if you flip back to sheet 3, you can see we proposed some arborvitae's along this berm as well, in the attempt to keep all the snow on our site and also keep all the drainage on our site. And as you said, there were some runoff issues, so we wanted to try and avoid that. And we've ensured that any drainage, any of this excess drainage that was draining to his site and now it's draining to ours, it doesn't affect the municipal system. It still ends up in this catch basin right here, and no issues with that. The next thing was drainage on the other property on 46A, Mr. Hillhouse's piece. I know he came before the board. He also issued the letter about some drainage issues back here in the rear of his lot and kind of being beached out a few times there. So what we've done is proposed a leaching catch basin along the corner of the parking lot there. And what this does is it catches a majority of the runoff coming from the back of this parking lot, which should have been handled previously. We're now handling it. And it basically just infiltrates into the ground, prevents a lot of runoff from getting onto his piece, and hopefully will prevent any beaching issues in the future. This has also been incorporated into our drainage report, and that's been reviewed and accepted by DPW as well, so we're very comfortable with that. The next thing was lighting. I know the staff report mentioned adding some additional details for the lights. We have done that. We have added a typical wall pack detail in the detail sheet. I can flip to it if you guys want, but it's pretty standard. I know the staff report also mentioned some additional notes being added to ensure that the lights are downcast and not mounted above 25 feet. We absolutely agree with that, and that can be added to the plan, no problem.
But that has not been added, but will be?
Correct. The next issue related to the dumpster on site. The existing plan did not originally show the dumpster location. We have added it to the plan right here. Currently, it's orientated the other way for, obviously the traffic was going the opposite way that it's going now. So we have proposed to rotate it, no big deal. I know there were some screening and fencing questions that the staff report brought up. We don't show a fence on this plan. That's something that can absolutely be added. No problem. We can do that to the final plans.
Could you show us again where it is, please?
Right here. Right behind the back stairs, 2 back staircases. The penultimate issue was the subsurface drainage system. So I know DPW mentioned some concerns with maintenance. Scott and I actually talked before the meeting, discussed a couple options for maintenance. We have proposed the 2 inspection ports on either pipe in the subsurface system. That might change. We might, originally the intent was to have these inspection ports and have maintenance kind of go through. You can jet back these systems out through either catch basin. I think we're just going to switch these inspection ports and make them access ports so it can be jetted out there. And Scott agreed with me on that as well. The final concern is the boundary.
I have a question. You said you think you are. Are you going to, when we say, what's the plan going to be? Is that what it's going to be?
In regards to the maintenance there?
Or is that something we're going to...
You
are ambiguous in your statement of what
we
you're
were
going to do.
locked out, and he explained to me how he anticipated to clean it with the layout that they submitted for this plan. And I think it would work. I think it'd be kind of difficult. They'd have to actually get down in the catch basin and kind of reach the jet through the 90. So he and I discussed, and it sounds like he's willing to put larger ports at the end so that they can jet in each direction and then be able to put their vac down. And I'm very comfortable with that.
So
He's going to change it, is what it
right,
says.
the question is he making an affirmative statement of what will be, or is it a proposal subject to your review? Which is fine, as long as we know what's going to happen.
If he does it that way, I will absolutely accept it. That's acceptable to me, that
Okay.
solution.
I'm sorry, Tim. No, it's fine, Jim.
The final issue having to do with the overlap and the boundary dispute that we have shown here. So I'll just preface this by saying that we have done extensive research into this boundary. This is the correct boundary that's shown. I believe we've submitted a letter from our licensed land surveyor, Chris Hickey, who who's kind of documented the process behind determining this boundary. With that being said, we're trying to act in good faith here. We're good neighbors. I know that the Hill Houses have used that strip of land for a long time under the assumption that they've owned it. There's a row of hedges there that they've maintained for a long time. We have no issue with that at all, and really it has, the overlap issue has no kind of bearing on the overall project. Nothing is proposed to be altered in this area. We're completely leaving it untouched. So what we'd like to work with Mr. Hillhouse. We've kind of drafted up a 10-foot wide easement that we'd be willing to grant him to allow him to continue to maintain things on his side or our side of the property. And we only ask that we just kind of keep this between property owners and not really up to the board for discussion, as kind of it would be if this wasn't a proposed site plan, just be kind of owner to owner discussing it. So I'll leave it at that, and I'd love to hear you guys' comments as well as public input as well. Thank you.
Scott, could you come up to the table, please?
Yes.
So I concur with the design on Brad's side that prevents the stormwater, the seasonal melt from running onto his land by the construction of a berm prevented direct water. On the other side, we have a proposed leaching catch basin. What design criteria do you design to keep that type of catch basin for how it's going to perform, or what storm status, that kind of thing?
So I don't have the,
I do have the drainage report. I have the drainage report.
so there's not a large catchment area for back there. I think in a large storm, Mike's had some issue, or the Hill Houses have had some issues. But, I mean, this was kind of I didn't see the issue with the initial review, seeing that the catchment area wasn't huge, so I didn't even catch it on the first review. And this time around, the way it's graded, the majority of the water kind of loops around the back of the building to the front. So I don't quite know how much even drains off of this property based off the contours that we have. So I didn't really evaluate the detention and infiltration of it. I don't even know if it was in your report, was it?
Yes, we absolutely modeled it.
So there's not a huge area, so.
Scott's correct, it is not a very significant area. Trying to see if I can get a number for you here. I believe it ponds up in the 50-year storm, but in smaller storm events it infiltrates the majority of runoff going to it.
Are you proposing any earthwork there, a berm behind it to retain the water?
No berm behind it, just install it. It's kind of a natural low there anyway, and we've set the rim a little bit lower than the surrounding elevations.
Well, like most everybody in this room, we're all landowners, and nobody wants anybody else's water on their land. So I need to have some sort of assurance that this is going to work, that we're not going to have an approved leaching catch basin that, by your design, and hopefully reviewed by Public Works, that is going to work and not, in the first big rainstorm, fail, because it is a leaching basin and it has no overflow system built into it.
Sure, and I would offer that I believe our stormwater management report does properly address the drainage issues out there. You can see pre to post rates. I believe are matching, if not decreased, to that side of the property, so we are decreasing stormwater runoff to his property, and we're also adding this proposed catch basin as well.
A lot of plans at the end of the planning process, we always say that if a problem arises in the future, we reserve the right to bring it back in here and make corrections and make changes to mitigate problems. So this could be one of those cases that I might think about asking for that, for the rest of the board to vote on a statement to that effect.
Okay.
Any other board members?
I have a question.
Anybody?
Did you get a report from NHB with any species hits?
From the Natural Heritage Bureau?
Yes, I believe this is, we had to apply for a shoreland permit, so I believe we're required to do an NHB search as well. I don't think they came back with anything. Tell you what, let me look through this and I can get you a solid answer.
In the meantime, will you tell us what the NHB is?
I'm sorry, the New Hampshire Natural Heritage Bureau, we were required to submit a site for state and listed species. And if there are turtles listed, then sometimes they have a limitation on the catch basin breeds.
Yep, so I found it. It is in our shoreland protection permit application, which I believe the town received a copy of as well. There were no known endangered species located in the project vicinity.
Okay, thanks.
Other board members? So we're gonna go back to the landscaping and screening plan that.
Barbara has a question too.
I'm sorry,
Well, that's
Barbara.
all right, you're leading right to where I want to go.
So we're gonna go back to the landscaping and screening plan you're asking for a waiver from. I think what this board is looking for would be for you to physically identify all of the
Individual,
landscaping
yep.
that's on site and make sure it is represented on a sheet. That way, 10 years from now, when something dies and gets cut down, we're holding you to your feet to the fire that it was there when you got your request approved, and it needs to be there in perpetuity. So
Okay.
I think that's where we're going with the request from the board.
Sure. And
I think that can be done on the existing conditions plan.
absolutely. That's what,
Identify
exactly what
the
I would
individual
suggest.
species.
Yep.
May-
No, not if we're proposing. If we're proposing, then that wouldn't be the existing conditions. for-
Well,
Well-
we're talking about the existing plantings that
Okay.
we've got the photos of. The big rhodey, the arborvitae.
You may have to produce a legend that would identify each species in the legend as well.
I know we do call out, we usually call out trees of certain diameters. I know we have one called out on the plan, a couple actually. But if you guys would like to see the shrubs, that's something we can easily just go out and grab real quick and put on a plan.
I don't know how board members feel about anything else with that. Barbara, do you have something else on that subject?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you for addressing the comments. It is somewhat refreshing to come back with a plan that pretty much addresses everything we talked about. Again, looking at sheet 3, I agree that we need to mark them out, and I just sort of want to make a couple of comments. You know, obviously on the hedge, what are you calling it here, the hedgerow, indeed, it looks like that's where maybe these arborvitae, I don't know, have you seen the pictures that Joanne took?
Yeah, she just gave me a
Okay,
copy
all right.
actually.
So the last sheet shows the arborvitae's, and I guess I would ask that they be shown as obviously arborvitae's and not a hedgerow, because I can't really tell the difference between what we appear to be going into a shrub line. And just for clarification, if I go to the northwest corner, are those also 4 new bushes that you're proposing to put back there, or are they there currently?
No, that is correct. Those are 4 new.
Okay, because I think that would be helpful for you to identify in your legend existing as compared to,
Sure, we do list, it's not helpful really now, but we do list a proposed plant list at the very bottom of sheet 3. And it does call out the size and mature heights of those types of plants.
oh, it's over here on the left, where you're lighting, I wondered where your lighting notes are.
On the bottom.
The bottom
On
plant
the bottom
list,
of the
yeah,
scale.
next to the scale.
Oh, all right, okay.
But we do have typical landscaping notes as well up there.
Is the type on these plans getting smaller?
It is, I don't understand it, but it is. But it's not just us, because we have bills now in Concord requiring font sizes on submissions, because it gets to be
Should be
ridiculous.
at least 14.
14, all right. All right, then I would like to move to the rhododendron, which is the first 2 pictures, because I'm concerned about the snow storage area. Now, I'm not really concerned about the snow storage, because somehow that site is managed. You're taking care of the impact on the abutters, so I'm happy. But this rhododendron would appear to be directly in the middle of your snow storage, because if I look at the second picture, it is by the telephone pole and at least 2 spaces in.
Sure.
So And I suspect what I see on the sheet with what appears to be the little stone wall is the cropping around the sign. And then there appear to be another hedge on the other side of that. So it looks to me like the rhododendron and the hedge would be directly impacted by this snow storage. So I guess I'd like to hear whether I'm completely off in my spatial observation.
No, I don't think you are. I think that's spot on. So, honestly, if the snow storage in that area is that big of a concern, we can remove it from the plan. I think there's a decent amount of space shown along the lot 46 kind of property line there, and we've done enough to ensure that stays on the property. We've also added, like I said, note 15 to ensure that snow is hauled off in the event that it is too much and overflows in those areas. So if that's your concern, then that can be accommodated.
Thank you. I guess my concern is that we're going to show the rhododendron, right? If we're asking you to show
Sure.
the shrubs, now the rhododendron gets showed right in the middle of the snow storage. I don't have a problem if it's a smaller snow storage and you show some more, but
I don't think they're not going to be plowing snow right onto their nice rhododendron in the winter.
You never know. In the
Yeah.
middle of a snowstorm at 3 a.m., we don't all know where our snow ends up. So anyways, that's just my concern. You've made a representation. You're not going to impact the current landscaping. So if you show it, just make an adjustment to the snow storage note on the plan accordingly.
Sure, we
please.
can absolutely do that.
Other member? Do you have anything else for us at this time, Pete?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, guys.
Okay. I know we have folks in the gallery tonight, so I'm going to ask you and Scott to vacate those seats.
Will do.
So at this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody who wishes to be heard on this application is welcome to come up, identify yourself, and state your comments. For the record, the Hill House family has submitted a letter that I had in my hand a minute ago, and I would like to be sure that it is actually titled map 30 lot 46-1 and lot 46A lot line from Mike Hillhouse, sent to Joanne Duffy, and I'd like this email to be entered into the record this evening. Everyone has a copy of it. So with that, I'll invite anyone who'd like to speak to come up.
You go first, I read your letter. I'm not sure I have a lot to add in the letter, but I'll just get up anyways.
Mike, we don't read the letter into the record, so if you'd like to highlight the letter for the record, we're happy to have you do it. So, I'll let you begin.
Mike Hillhouse, live at 95 South Mass, the butter to the right. In general, the letter is basically our two concerns. One is obviously that lot line. The other is the drainage coming off of the property. I appreciate you, Chairman, you're wanting that to be a functioning drainage system. I haven't looked at the grade since whatever, but the berm going here doesn't bother me as long as the water that used to go over here doesn't now go over there, because it's a leaching basin. It only has so much capacity. That's just the nature of them. But that's my only concern with the drainage. I do appreciate your possibly making an effort to do something with the lot line, or lot line issue there. We'll, obviously, I guess we're gonna be discussing that. But that's basically, I appreciate your consideration with these items while you're making your decision.
So before you leave, the applicant has requested that we leave the lot line issue between you and him,
Yes.
them. And I want to make sure that you're in concurrence with that, or you disagree with that?
Well, I understand the planning board isn't necessarily here to to solve that type of an issue. All we want to do is, it's definitely not something, oh yeah, go ahead, that's not where we are with that, so.
Okay, I just want to make sure it was on the record that it was stated.
Right.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
So I just generally, like, this is gonna be a recorded site plan. Don't we want to resolve the new line so that for future reference there is, I guess yeah, help.
The short answer is no, that's not our job. That's what they invented courts for. The plan shows on sheet, well, sheet 1 notes the overlap, so it's noted in the public record that there's an issue.
Okay.
But it's not, I don't think, let me rephrase. Generally, we don't have jurisdiction to resolve boundary disputes. It's not something we do. Where we have addressed them is when it's material to the plan. Let's say, for example, if this were resolved adversely to the applicant, they did not have enough area or something, then we might, and have in the past, required that it be resolved because it is material to the plan. But here it is not. And because it's noted on the plan, we're not approving or making a finding. It's still a private matter. And the applicant has, I think, addressed it by saying they intend to honor the use, if not the ownership, because that's something we can't resolve. So I'm comfortable with this, and I think we would be outside of our jurisdiction to require more.
Okay, good explanation.
Carlos, do you agree?
So I think I understand what you're saying, Jim, is, in other words, if the lot line was in one position, it may render the lot not big enough.
If
Or,
that were
for
the
instance,
case.
If that were the case.
Yeah, and
Or
we,
interfered with a setback or
Right.
something.
yeah, we may then
For
want it to
example.
be, and have in the
Right,
past,
right.
but that's not the case here.
Yeah,
So
understood.
the issue is preserved for the
Yeah.
parties by that note.
Okay.
Okay. Barbara?
I think we need, and I would like people who comment on this, of what to do about fencing around this dumpster. That's sort of an open
Well, we
issue.
still have we have public hearings open at this time, so
Well, I'm
we'll come
sort of
back to
mentioning it because I forgot
Yeah, I
whether,
forget it too.
whether Mr. Hillhouse might have had an opinion on the fencing and what to do, and we didn't discuss it with the applicant before we opened the public hearing. Okay.
It's rather a restricted area behind the building.
Well, that's my,
With steps and exactly how the fencing is going to be,
well, that's, but I know, I'd like to hear from the abutters.
is
on
going
the
to work.
issue.
Okay. Brad, you want to speak?
Yes, please. My name is Brad Parkhurst. I live at 81 South Mass Street. I'm the abutter here at lot 46. And it just, when you started talking, I wasn't sure, you proposed the entrance now to be here rather than here.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and looking at one of the, actually, there's the photo overlay, showed the property line here, over here, which is significantly encroaching on my property.
Well, what are you talking about, Brad? Where is that? You're speaking of that property line.
Okay, my house is here, this is the property line here. They have a proposal to put parking spaces in here. This boulder, but on the, and
We talked about it later last hearing.
this is just a map overlay somebody did with the drone. And it shows property line here.
Is that a GIS map, Brad? or is that a
Town's GIS.
Yeah, the town GIS maps are famously incorrect.
Okay.
So you have to understand that, too.
Okay, so I was concerned about that. Yes, I realize the property line goes right through that boulder and everything. I appreciate by the fact that you want to put a berm there so that the water goes to, right? But I'm also concerned that the water goes onto his property, where he's also had trouble during the Hill House's property. I thought somebody was gonna come and talk to me and kind of walk the line and take a look and say, this is what we're gonna do. I never saw anybody. I have original, from when I bought the property, showing a plat of the A.S. Dearborn Estate that was done in 1975 by Bob Todd. At the time when I bought my house, I was lot 46. It was 46-1 and 46-2. I think you're on 46-1, Mike?
And I don't know if it'll be a quiz.
Oh, sorry.
46A. He's 46A.
46A,
Thank you.
See, I don't, what I have, I don't know what 46A,
that's Mike's lot.
that's my lot?
You're lot 46, Brad.
Yes, I am. And when I bought the property from Asgard's and Gilbert's, Dan DeGrania owned this property along with a couple of other people. I want to say Pasek and perhaps Dr. Michaud. When I bought it, there was no professional building there. I bought it in 1984. They put in the building in 1987. I really haven't had any problems with them, except for the flooding 3 times into my barn. And then it reached the point where it drained off behind the medical building now, over into the area on the Hill Houses property. Prior to me buying the property, 40 feet of the original property was deeded to Dan DeGrania, I think as payment for some work that he did on my present house, because they didn't have the money. In 1996 or 97, I requested a lot consolidation because lot 46-3, which goes down East Union Street, at that time it was said it was non-conforming. Originally when the plat plan was made, it was determined that it was a conforming building lot. That doesn't make any difference because I did consolidate the 2 lots, 46 and 46-3. You probably don't show that on the,
No, it's not shown on our plans.
I have it. So again, I want to thank the professional building or the medical center for trying to resolve the issue with the drainage. I'm concerned about where the water is going to go. I'm not an architect, I'm not a person who understands all of these stuff, and a lot of what's on these maps have changed. On my property, right near where the property line is, there used to be a catch basin that they're talking about proposing. That's been filled with concrete when they redid the road, was it about 15 years ago? I just have concerns with the traffic problem, and I also am concerned that unless they have a lot of plans for increasing capacity and use for the building, that there's a need for additional parking spaces. To this day, I do not see all the parking spaces that are presently there occupied. Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak at the public hearing?
I
Mike's coming
just
back.
thought I overheard something, but I couldn't hear what you were saying, but it sounded like you were wondering what a butter thoughts were on it.
Do you see, they have proposed a dumpster behind the property. Do you see that from your property? David, if you can show them where it's gonna be.
I generally look up at the beautiful job Dave has done on the rail trail is what I try to do.
Good answer.
It's there. It's,
And if there's no fencing around it now?
no, but
The applicant stated he'd be willing to fence it
It's
if we
over
asked him
there.
to. I heard him say
is
it.
that the fence that's being discussed is just?
Right, around the
dumpster?
dumpster, to shield the dumpster.
I have nowhere,
Okay.
either way, I was
Alright.
more concerned if you were thinking on the lot line.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody else want to speak at the public hearing? All right, seeing none, we'll close public hearing. For the board's discussion, nobody seems to have keyed in on the direction of travel being changed on the site. Does anybody see any possible issues with reversing the travel? Or is it advantageous because the entrance or exit is closer to the roundabout? I don't know.
Just a question, did the police review that? Is that anything that the police, they typically look at these plans to know if
They
there's an issue?
didn't have any comments.
Okay, are they aware of the reversal of traffic, and is that something that they,
They have not seen, because we don't have it on here. They have, I mean, we have it on here, but they don't get another copy. They just get,
okay, I guess the question is,
first copy.
Tim's response, is that a material issue that, a material change from the earlier plan that the police reviewed that we want comment on? I'm asking actually, I don't know the answer. I mean, the answer may be no, but
Well, I would think it would be easy enough to make a condition that the traffic change is okay to the police.
I don't see it as that big a change. And I go into this,
And I think people go in both ways.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
both ways now anyways, as a practical
Okay.
matter.
so no harm, no foul.
will there be signs?
Yes, actually, good point, John.
They are,
Yes, we have a couple enter-only signs here. There's a do not enter sign on the back of the stop sign. There's also another standalone one there. And we also proposed some pavement markings too, just to kind of promote flow through the site.
Okay.
So you were talking about signs, you have your enter-only signs out at the street side. Do you show any signage at the end of that lane where you meet the parking lot that tells people they're not supposed to go out that way? I don't see any.
I'm sorry.
In the entrance driveway, you've
Sure.
got two.
Yep.
There are enter-only signs shown at the street side of the
We can
entrance.
add do not enter signs on the
I
back. of
think,
those.
I
see what
think you
you're
need
saying.
something where
Yeah.
where the radius 5 is marked,
For people
something
going
there,
out, that's what
so
I'm
people
saying.
don't wanna use that.
Yep, absolutely.
And on the subject of the dumpster, you stated your applicant is willing to screen the dumpster?
That's correct.
Then I think it should be shown on an upcoming plan.
Sure.
And I'm gonna leave the discussion to the board members whether these are gonna be considered administrative or require another visit. Any other issues that we still have to decide on the landscape waiver? My way of thinking is if they're going to produce a detailed plan that shows all the existing landscape items, and they're going to require that, we're gonna require that they maintain them in perpetuity, that I would think that a landscape waiver would be appropriate. I don't know how other board members are feeling at this time.
Okay with it.
I'm okay with that.
yeah, I agree.
All right, so I need a motion from someone on the landscape waiver request.
I'm gonna move that on the basis of the existing landscaping and the additional landscaping proposed by the applicant, particularly on the western boundary, and the nature of the increase in use, which is relatively minor, that we grant the waiver of the landscaping requirement for the usual reasons that Gail will put into the motion.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to grant the landscaping waiver based on the statements that the existing landscaping will be
Shown
shown
on the
and,
plan.
and the additional landscaping will be shown on the plan.
Correct.
And it becomes part of the,
and
site.
shown and maintained, I think we want to,
well, I think that's,
With
well,
legend.
yeah, we've had that issue in the past, it dies, so,
If-
but I'm not concerned in fact, because they have maintained it, but I think we need to make it clear
I
generally.
think it's a fairly understood statement that if it's shown on the plan, it's on the plan. We don't really need a statement to the effect that it has to be
It
maintained.
gets
because-
forgotten, but
Okay.
yeah, in theory, you're right.
Okay. Motion's been made, been granted, it's been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion passes.
Who seconded the motion?
Kimberly,
Tim, you also need to vote on the relief of the outer 50 feet.
yeah, I was working my way towards that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm trying
wanted
to
to
take
make
care of the
sure.
issues that everybody was on right now, which is the actual application, isn't it? The actual application states grant from the outer 50 on the,
It's just a separate vote.
okay. So, there is a request to be granted a waiver from the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland conservation district line. And for that purpose, it was explained at a prior meeting. And does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to discuss on the relief issue? It was shown on the plan in a wavy line that meandered through the back of the parking lot, as I remember. And it may have taken in a piece of the new area as well.
I'll move that based upon the report submitted by the applicant that shows the functions, values, and conditions of the wetlands will not be impaired, and the relatively minor encroachment, and particularly the fact that the rail trail crosses directly behind, that we grant the waiver.
Motion is made. Can I hear a second?
Second.
Hollis? Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
I'd like to call us whenever we get into wetlands
Well, the
issues.
Conservation Commission took this up and had no issues or
Yeah, I
concerns,
was
so
just about
so
to add
that
that,
that
but
should be
yeah.
noted.
Great.
So it sounds to me like one of our conditions, if I heard it correctly, was that in regards to the change of direction in the parking lot, that was going to be after a police review, if it'll stand if the police don't have a problem with it.
Yeah,
Did I hear you correctly?
alternatively, we just put the condition that if in fact it creates a traffic issue, we can bring it back.
Revisit
I don't think it will, so we haven't seen any evidence, so either way, I just don't want to do a blanket approval if it turns out we made a mistake.
Joanne or Scott, were there any outstanding reports or studies that were due to be reviewed that have not been done? Everything been submitted?
The shoreline, on the shoreline, the drainage that you needed to review.
I took a quick look at the leach and catch basin thing, and I kind of want to take a closer look, but it does have, it's about a tenth above the grade at the 50-year storm. And the thing I'm not that familiar with is what part of the regs dictates leaching catch basins. So you talk about surcharging pipes on closed drainage, and then, when it comes to detention pond, we talk about detention ponds and retention ponds in the regs, but leaching catch basins, I don't know necessarily in there, so I don't know what criteria to really review it on, but review it on its standard.
Then it should be overbuilt if we're not going to be able to review it.
That's almost
It
what
should
I
be
was thinking.
overbuilt then.
I think it's a 4-foot structure, maybe it was a 5-foot structure. Maybe it goes to a
An 8?
larger structure or a deeper structure to alleviate that 50-year storm.
Well, we shouldn't be guessing at it.
5-foot interior diameter. It's on sheet 7 if you guys want
What's
to take a look
what's
at
the height?
It is 6 feet minimum. I have to look at the drainage report to see if we spec'd it any deeper. But it's surrounded by 3/4 inch washed crushed stone. I think 24 inches on either side, and then 24 inches below as well. So
Well, I think
technically it's an 8-foot deep, 6-foot deep structure with 2 feet of stone below it.
I certainly think this board could defer to the town engineer's review of the actual structure as presented. And based on that, he could either make a recommendation to Joanne that it is not adequate or is adequate, and then I'd be happy to leave that as an administrative decision between the town engineer and the applicant and Joanne, and let them resolve it to the satisfaction of the town engineer. Barbara?
question, and it's just because I don't understand drainage very well. Are we talking about a different issue than the one that we talked about when we were looking at sheet 4, where we apparently have an agreement that we're changing the courts to jets at the
That's
end?
that's internal drainage in the parking lot.
So that's
that long,
different.
that's that long strip.
Right.
The other thing we're talking is in the opposite corner of the
Okay,
parking lot.
so I just want to clarify that that would be an additional
Well, that's
change in
right.
DPW approval
Right.
for drainage. Okay.
But that
So
would
there
be,
two things.
but that becomes a condition
Right.
of approval.
I have 20 conditions listed.
That's all right.
I scratched out 17 because it was listed twice. And then I've added the storm water changes need to be approved by the town engineer. They need to adjust the signage for the do not enter in the one-way, enter in only. And if the change in the flow of traffic creates, do you want to do that or have the police? Okay. If there's a change in the flow of traffic that would create any issues, they would be called back in. for further review.
And you're gonna put in the dumpster's gonna be screened.
I have that already.
Okay.
Up
That's
above.
15.
Yeah.
Oh, because it wasn't, okay, because it wasn't even on the plan. All right. Anything else that we discussed tonight that needs to be added as changes for the conditions from board members?
10. Could I comment that I'd like that to say, include a plan for snow removal as revised for landscape detail to be provided on 114 side?
So what was that you just asked about, Brenda?
Joanne had a condition of including a plan for snow removal,
Okay.
which they have on the plan, and I just wanted to make sure that the final approved plans are revised to account for the landscape detail that we've asked to be added to the plan.
And does this list include the landscaping plan that we requested?
No, that's not on there yet.
No.
So one other one, Joanne, would be to provide a landscaping plan per the waiver approval.
Showing the detail of existing and proposed shrubs.
And then we wanted the height limit on the lighting.
I have that
Sure.
up above, I
25
believe.
Which one is it?
16.
Okay.
John, I don't see any condition here that requires that prior, that the applicant provide a, I guess it would be a document at the end of the project that it was constructed in accordance with the plan. I don't see that on our list of conditions. Whether it's a letter or,
Say that again, that the,
normally we require that when a project is going to get a CO, that they have to provide documentation that the plan was constructed and the site was constructed in accordance with the approved plan. So we
Okay.
don't have any note
That
on
would-
here.
that would be an as-built.
Well, then I think an as-built would be required
Sure.
so that everything was constructed in accordance with the plan. I mean, they don't have to draw new plans. They could submit their
Well-
site plan with an engineer seal that that the project has been completed in accordance.
So that'd be an additional condition.
Sorry.
Barbara?
I just had a question about that condition, given what we're talking about is a change in paving. Isn't that
No,
covered by?
they're actually adding,
Well, some
and
drainage and that kind of thing.
they're
but-
doing earth moving in the back. They're cutting into the slope in the back corner, removing fills, creating more parking. And we have this issues with the drainage functioning properly, so I don't think it's out of the question to ask for them for an as-built.
It was one of my comments, I don't know why I didn't make it
Okay, Scott. Well, thank you anyway. Anybody else have anything to add for this? Oh, are we going to allow the changes to be handled administratively Did you have something? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I guess I'm mumbling.
I didn't see my peripheral vision.
Just wait for you. So I just want to check with Scott. It feels like we kicked a lot of this list over to you. Do you feel like this is administrative, or do you feel like you need to come back and have it reviewed by all of us again? It's a big list.
Yeah, it's a big list, but
Easy stuff, though. I think we've talked about it.
Well, I want to ask him.
I have a sense of what the board feels, and I can make sure that the comments are addressed to meet that and to my satisfaction as well.
Okay, good, just wanted to verify that.
Jim?
Just to be clear, there are two drainage issues that I recall. One was the northeast corner, the leaching catch basin. The second was what you referred to as the internal drainage and clearing out ports, whatever they call them. So I want to make sure both are
All right, so that
included
becomes-
as
yeah.
conditions, and right now I'm not sure they're both on.
So Scott, how would you term the condition that related to the inspection ports on the new proposed drainage in the parking lot?
I don't think I want to call them inspection ports moving forward. They should be like an access point, so that, I don't know how we could, so, ensure that underground detention system can be easily maintained. I think that's sufficient.
Why don't we say design for underground, maintenance of underground
I got it right
system
here.
satisfactory to the...
To the Public Works
Yeah,
Director.
Yeah.
So provide access to the underground detention system that's, for maintenance that is acceptable to the Public Works Director,
Yes.
or to the town engineer, excuse me.
I'll ask Adam if he's all right.
Don't even bother. Okay, we got that one in there.
Gail is grimacing at us, by the way, she types this.
Look at it. Watch it.
I'm sorry, I'm not usually asked to
You can
articulate these
hit me
things.
I thought Ken
I'll
was-
get better over time, I promise.
And you want a lawyer to make up words for engineering? I move that we approve with those conditions.
Motion to approve with conditions by Jim, seconded by Barbara. With conditions.
And I have 21 as of now, because we took out 17 and added.
And we're gonna allow the all these items that are in discussion to be handled administratively with Public Works and staff. Okay. Could that be a part, Barbara?
I just want to have the minutes reflect that I'll be voting in favor of the motion, and I also understand that the applicant's intent is to enter into an easement agreement with the adjoining property owner, but I understand that our approval of the plan does not address that.
So there's a motion to approve been made and seconded. Is any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the board.
It is nice to have We should thank the applicant and the representative for a good presentation.
Don't do it while he's still
Can
here.
I-
Nice job.
When they get in the pool, Jim, they generally run out the door. Okay. Our next application for tonight is on page 8.
I did a double take and then I'm like, all right, it's the T.
Tim, before we go there on this, I have to point out, my firm uses TF Moran on projects that we're involved with. I don't think that's a conflict, but you have to disclose that.
And I'll disclose, this is not making fun of Mr. Raymond, but that we use electricity that probably comes through this substation on a regular
I
basis.
think you should all recuse yourselves on that basis, but
So as long as we're all in the recusing
And I want to
mode.
know why I lost power today for 2 hours, but
Today?
that's okay, we'll move on.
So as long as we're recusing ourselves, I might as well recuse myself too, because I'm already in a dispute with public service over something on my land.
All right, we
So-
need some people to stay tonight.
So hopefully, I won't be biased in my opinions tonight.
Agreed.
Okay. This is 39 Mast Road, map 5, lot 15, public service. I should call it Eversource Energy, it's not that anymore, public service. Eversource now wants to build a new substation. They came in for conceptual a few meetings ago. We heard a lot from them. I hope we don't have to hear it all twice. But Joanne, I'd like you to step up to the plate and tell us what's going on.
So Eversource is here to do a rebuild of their substation. They would be actually locating it in the opposite direction on the other end of their land. And it would be an overall 3-year plan. And in the future, the other section that they're currently using would be demolished. And that would be used for something else in the future. So they're here tonight to get approval, excuse me, for their site plan for the new substation. And first of all, they don't have regional impact, and the plan is complete. And I'm also recommending that this is just going to be a regular thing from now on, that the board request the applicant to waive the 65-day clock. Just so we keep track of that. We don't have to worry about it.
was this here before us on a conceptual?
Yeah, it was-
It was just conceptual.
Conceptual. They are asking for a waiver for the landscaping and landscaping and screening, and they're permitting an alternative design for that, which Nick will present to you. They did go to the zoning board and they received a variance.
Two variances, one in regards to the location of utility structures to the property line, and the other was in regards to landscaping and the buffer that's proposed. So the buffer that'll be before you this evening is something that's already been reviewed by the ZBA.
Joanne, generally before we allow applicants to speak, they identify themselves for the record.
Certainly.
So please, why don't you just handle what we're talking about right now, and we'll get to the applicant in a minute.
They do require a conditional use permit, and there is a letter in your packet that can be found from TF Moran dated 5/20, which is titled conditional use permit, and they will need to go over that criteria with you. Staff does have comments. There are several comments from DPW, which Scott can go over. The Conservation Commission had no issues, and they appreciated the proposed planting of the trees for their alternative landscaping plan. So that's all I have at the moment.
So I'm looking at plan comments. I see page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and page 14. That's an awful lot of comments
So-
for a plan that's coming in for review.
So some of these comments from fire I actually put twice, so some of these comments will be eliminated. But the title outstanding items, those include the comments that are still outstanding from the various departments. So it's not an extra list, it's just compiling everything into one list.
So then you still come up with 33 comments.
Well, you need to eliminate 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's numbers 8, 9, 10,
6 through 14.
11, 12,
13.
13, 14. So those can be scratched out.
Okay.
So they're done? They're shown on the plan?
It wasn't, it had nothing to do with this plan, it was for the medical building. I just got cut
Thank
and
you, because
pasted.
I looked at the doors and the
What?
egress,
Yeah.
and I was
Not
like,
getting
what
that
are we
at all.
talking
It
about
just
here?
got cut and pasted to the wrong place.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, 14.
Let me start over here.
Okay. Numbers 8,
Wait a minute. How many pages are this application, Joanne? Are pages 12, 13, 14 not for this applicant, are you saying?
so this application starts on page 8,
Yeah,
and it runs through page 14.
right. So I'm confused.
So if you go to page 12, where it says outstanding items,
Yeah,
those are all of the items that the staff comments had. If you, please eliminate numbers 8,
you said that, 9, 10,
9,
11,
10, 11,
12.
12, 13, 14.
Because those were from the medical building.
Correct.
Oh. Okay.
And-
Now I understand how the medical building fits in.
There's another comment from Scott where he talks about the bioretention stormwater treatment and
19.
number 19, and he's saying that a waiver would be required if they use the standard infiltration basin. So depending on how that turns out, they may need another waiver.
Which would eliminate number 26 as well. We didn't use bioretention funds.
Right. Okay.
I should mention, it's in the report here, but I should mention that Eversource would like to ask the board if they would, they're requesting in one of the conditions of approval, an extra one, that within 2 years of site plan approval for the proposed substation rebuild, Eversource shall provide the proposed layout of the pole yard, which would go where the existing substation is, and that it be permitted accordingly with the town.
We talked about that at the conception.
Yes, so that's part of one of the conditions they would like to add.
Wait a minute, they never talked about the pole yard going into the old,
Yeah, they did.
Yes.
where was I? Okay, I just said they wanted to keep it for future use, I never heard them say they wanted to relocate the pole yard into that area. All right. I'll take you.
It was in one of my remarks that the applicant may want to state a future use such as pole storage.
Oh, I see.
Is the application complete?
It is,
Yeah,
and
so we're looking
there's
for a
no
motion.
regional impact.
I need a motion on the completeness ready for you, no regional impact and waivers for discussion purposes only.
Barbara just made the motion and I seconded it.
Very good.
And I stated it. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Okay. So anybody have any questions or comments for staff before I open it up to the applicants? Seeing none, I invite the applicants to identify themselves and get started.
Certainly. I'll first introduce myself. My name is Nick Golan. I'm a licensed engineer and principal with the firm TF Moran. Joined by my Eversource colleagues tonight. Sitting immediately to my right is their project manager, Natasha Morales. In the back, to your right, my left, is Mr. Kurt Nelson. He's a senior land use licensing and permitting specialist. Behind him and to his right is Stephanie Gardner with Project Services. She'd be responsible for abutter outreach. And then to her right is David Creer, who's a community relations specialist. So he would be typically working with Joanne relative to what type of projects are coming into town, keeping her apprised of what type of work is being done by Eversource. If I may, I'm going to back up real quick just relative to the staff comment and then speak to the components of our project if we can. As Joanne noted, there were several items that are not in relationship to this project. It's just an oops, sometimes it happens. We had the opportunity to reach out to Lieutenant Bill Connor relative to concerns for fire department. We'll work out any concerns he may have, but he was actually kind enough to be the one to say, yeah, those aren't for your project, those are somebody else. So from that standpoint, we have far fewer comments than were necessarily expected. Relative to the DPW comments, had the opportunity to have some correspondence with Scott. we'll work out a draft response and go over those items. Several of the items are items that we've dealt with in the past, specifically in relationship to substations, so I want to bring them up to speed on what the town has approved in the past, that being our under drain system, how it's modeled, and in relationship to how the stormwater management system is intended to work in relationship to this particular type of development. So I look forward to the opportunity to sit down with him and review those items.
Before you go another step,
Yes, sir.
are you willing to waive the 65-day clock?
We are.
Okay. So noted for the record.
Okay. So, relative to the projects that is before you, I realize this did come before you conceptually. The intent is this is a system reliability project to replace existing aged infrastructure. The original substation that's out there was built in the 1940s. Beyond the fact that the equipment is beyond its useful life, you actually see, starting to see some wear and tear on the steel itself. Over the years, we've been in for amendments to site plans. I think the most recent was 2018, and prior to that, 2015. We added control houses, we added switchgear equipment. At this point, there aren't any more Band-Aids to put on it, and a total rebuild is required. So relative to the application, we did come in before you conceptually. We thought it would be important to talk about what the project itself was, as well as how the existing Gregg substation would be handled. At that meeting, we had conveyed that there was the potential that it would be reused as a pole yard. The area in which the proposed substation is being located is currently a pole yard. So it made sense that that use would essentially be transitioned. Now, given that this is almost a different entity of Eversource, it's their facilities division that's going to be managing that area. We don't have all the information that we know this board will need in order to act on how that area would be used in the future. Given that we know this is going to be about a 3-year process in order to cut in the temporary lines, build the new substation, and discontinue the old substation, our proposal is to come back to you within a 2-year time frame. So if the project's going to take 3, that gives us an extra year of cushion to make sure that however that area is to be used is consistent with your expectations, and then we would obtain whatever permits would be required. So that was the condition that we wanted to propose to this board. We had some discussion on it at the conceptual, and we brought it through to fruition to make sure that the appropriate powers at Eversource had a comfort level with that, and ideally, hopefully, this board does as well. Within Joanne's staff report, she does also mention traffic. So being that this is a DOT curb cut, we've actually already submitted to DOT for the alteration relative to the proposed use. And we have the same expectation that when the formal existing substation is discontinued, that we would need to make an additional filing with them and really jump through all the same hoops that we are for this project. Beyond the ZBA approvals that have already been achieved, we've already done our coordination with Natural Heritage Bureau. There are no rare and endangered species that are located within proximity to this project. That being said, we still incorporated biodegradable silt socks and steep slope protection, because even though they're not listed, the probability, given our location to Glen Lake, they could be there. So Eversource is doing a good job as an environmental steward in making sure those elements are incorporated. Additionally, beyond, so since our last meeting when we saw you in April, we filed with the Division of Historical Resources. It's another sister entity relative to the permit process. We've received confirmation that there are no items of historical significance that would be impacted by this project, so that box has been checked. Being the proximity to Glen Lake and this being located within the state shoreland, we've also filed with the state for a shoreland permit. That has not been issued yet, but it is within their review window for reviewing that application for approval. We've also submitted to alteration of terrain. So we have over 100,000 square feet of impact, and in this case, we even have 25,000 square feet of impact or more within a shoreland, so that necessitates that permit. The permit application has been deemed complete and is just pending review. Any other permits I can think of? Oh, we do, this is a little bit of an oddity, so we do have a septic system that's associated with this project and a water well. That filing has been made first, obviously, with the town for a pre-approval. Pre-approval has been issued. That was then passed along to the state, and they have, we'll say, essentially approved our permit, but it's subject to AOT. So the way in which the Subsurface Bureau is now handling their applications, anything that's also tied to another state permit, you need to achieve that permit first. I do have correspondence from those folks, if you're so interested, that basically says, this is approved pending your AOT permit. So we've been able to check that box as well. All right, that's the lay of the land relative to the permitting ramifications. To talk to the project itself, and I realize you've heard most of this before, so I'll try and be succinct with my words. Relative to the parcel itself, to the east side of the site is the location of the existing Gregg substation. As we work our way further east is the Greggs Falls Dam. To our south, we have the existing ball fields. To our southwest is a portion of the rail trail. One of the specific items that we noted during the conceptual is we have a little bit of an oddity that there's an existing 30-foot state of New Hampshire right-of-way. So we're keeping our work out of that area. So those existing trees that are there now will remain, but we've provided a significant landscape buffer, knowing that should the DOT ever want to move forward with developing that, those trees would be lost. Further to our west is an undeveloped state lot, and then we have the Goffstown Rail Trail that continues. And then if I can, one of the things that was pointed out, Joanne pointed out conceptually, was I think it's Glen Place is located further beyond. And one of the things that was identified of importance during our conceptual is, let's make sure there's adequate screening for these folks. I can say that they'll have their existing screening on their property that will remain. We'll have the area of the rail trail, and then we also have the state land that provides buffer, the existing buffer, and then we're providing a supplemental buffer. So when I look at all those things combined, I think we've achieved the request to make sure that we've provided suitable buffer for those folks. This is a nice plan just from the standpoint, it gives us a nice little bit of a worldview. One of the items that came up in our meeting with the Conservation Commission was in regards to the bluff. I think we had some dialogue in this meeting as well, trying to, get folks to not necessarily have direct access to that area. One of the requests of the Conservation Commission was actually for Eversource to consider an easement to be granted to the town so that we can provide better access through our yard, at least to the limits of our property, and then something with the state would have to be further pursued. Natasha was able to review that with the powers that be at Eversource and are agreeable to that request. So I'm already in coordination with their real estate person, Jennifer Ducharme, who will be reaching out to you guys relative to the nature of how we define that easement. I'm thinking it's probably most logical, we're not necessarily going to do a meets and bounds, but prescribe an area that allows you guys access, because we don't know what's going to happen with Greggs Falls, or the existing Greggs substation in the future, but it'll define an area so that police, fire always have access to that area. One of the other requests, and this was post our submittal, so we'll need to add it to the plan, but was a request for a gate. So that's something I'll have the dialogue with Bill Connors with, relative to fire, and also reach out to police. But that would provide a gate at the limits of what's essentially the existing trail that they use to maintain their right-of-way. But that's further going to discourage people from heading out to the bluff.
Please clarify right away.
Sure.
Point to it.
Yep, at this limit right here, so at the end of the property line, a right-of-way extends across the bluff. You can see where that overhead line is. So Eversource has existing rights across that state of New Hampshire line.
Power line corridor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I think we've done a couple of good things with the meetings that we've had since. Town's done a good job of identifying some issues, and I think Eversource has done a nice job of responding to make sure that those issues can be addressed in the future. If I flip to our proposed plan, if I may, I'll go over briefly just the layout of our facility, and we'll talk a little bit about drainage, and see if there's any questions from the board. All right, so this color graphic provides really a blow-up of the representation that we were just looking at. Existing Gregg substation to the east, proposed substation to the left. This dashed line represents really the limits of work, so this existing driveway is going to remain in totality. There's nothing that we're planning to do it. It provides all the necessary turning radiuses for the vehicles that are currently accessing the site, whether those are bucket trucks for the substation or pole trucks for the existing pole yard. It provides all the needed turning movements and also all the needed turning movements that are required for our police fire apparatus as well. As we drive into the site, you can see we've provided a site driveway to this chamfered edge to provide access within the substation. The idea is once this substation is constructed, we're not having regular visitors. This isn't a retail establishment. There aren't regular employees. This is a non-inhabited control building. But they do monthly maintenance checks. So the expectation is once a month you're going to have somebody who'll be pulling into this yard, park within the yard. As you can see, there's no dedicated parking because there's no parking demand for this facility. This shows the complete build-out of the general arrangement. The substation yard itself is just shy of about 106,000 square feet. What this is a really gravel matrix. You have a top course that's about that is 4 inches, and it's a 50% of washed, clean stone, 3/4 to 1/2 inch. So it has a nice void ratio to it. It's one of the benefits of using for the substation, not only for safety relative to electric currents or otherwise to make sure that power can get down into the ground and grid below. Also provides a great membrane for stormwater storage. So we essentially have a 30% void ratio within the substation yard itself. Below that is a more compacted crushed gravel. And around the perimeter of the substation, what we do is put in an underdrain with grades to drain, so that during larger peak storms where that infiltrative capacity doesn't exist within the stone, it has the opportunity to overflow into that underdrain and then discharge to this proposed stormwater management area that's located to the west. Now, we did specify this as an infiltration basin. It was aptly pointed out, and I know we reviewed that with Sarah in the past, that fire retention is a requirement in Goffstown. I think that was implemented when you guys looked at the low impact development strategies to make sure that stormwater was being managed appropriately throughout the town. It is stated those are for private sites. I realize, Eversource is somewhat of a governmental entity, but I suppose that would still apply if the board feels that it's appropriate. The difference between the bioretention area and the infiltration basin that we're proposing is really the matrix, the soils itself. The bioretention area uses a filter media, whereas, which is really just a mix of different soils that achieves a certain infiltration rate, versus the infiltration basin that we're proposing, which is using those natural parent soils, which would be amended to slow them down. We're right next to the lake. We have good sandy, gravelly soils, so rapid infiltration was experienced during all the test pits that we conducted. If there's a preference to use a bioretention filter media, sure. No objections to that. We're just trying to use the materials that we had currently on site to the best of our advantage. If it's not a concern, we would certainly be interested in entertaining a waiver request for that, given that the existing parent soils are rapidly infiltrating and otherwise would be amended in accordance with state requirements. So if that's such a motion or such a waiver that I can request this evening, fantastic. If it requires us to come back, understood. So speaking a little bit more to the stormwater management system, it is considerably over-designed presently. We recognize the fact that we are adjacent to the Goffstown Rail Trail. That's very much a sense of pride to the community, and we'll make sure there's no ill effects relative to our stormwater management associated with this. You'll see the outfall is generally directed that way. During a 100-year storm, we have 1 foot of freeboard currently, which is excessive, so there is no discharge presently. The reason why we had located our outfall in that location is that's where the site drains to now. So when we look at our pre-development, post-development drainage, we need to be in keeping with what those tributary areas are, and that's really this property line here. So I guess it would be ideal, you could say, yeah, we can direct it this way, there's no discharge, so there's no increase. But we're just trying to be consistent with the natural topography relative to where the site is discharging. So that's something we can explore, that's the desire. Landscaping. So relative to the landscaping proposed, we have a system of approximately 91 green wave arborvitaes. This was what the landscape screen was that we presented to the zoning board and was approved by them. It should provide a nice screening for this both at current planting, and then these will grow over time. The only areas in which this is deficient and the nature of the waiver request is we have a section of just over 200 linear feet that's directly under the overhead lines. For the safety of the workers, the integrity of the electrical system, the plantings have been omitted in that area. The additional area in which those are omitted is actually within the portion of the property that extends onto the state property that is a right-of-way. So again, it's the same scenario where we have overhead lines, and for the safety of the workers and also the integrity of the line, they would be omitted in that area. Otherwise, there's no formal site lighting that's proposed as part of the substation. Similar to the other substations you have, both Rimmon Substation and Pinardville. It's emergency lighting only. The expectation, if your lights are off, our lights are on, because we're working to get the power back on. So we'll make sure that there's a note added to the plan that states that more clearly. We had already discussed the zoning elements and what had been approved. Try and be as short as I can with this and open it to questions.
Board members. Barbara.
It seems to me, given the approvals that have been applied for or obtained, that the issue is really the drainage and approval of the drainage? I mean, obviously we need to, but conservation seems to be happy with things. They've applied for their permits. They've gotten the ZBA approval. We have a conditional use permit we're going to need to deal with. There's a question about whether they need an additional waiver. But just looking at the comments, that seems to be where we're at. And I'm just saying that because I don't know that this board is in a position to get into detailed discussion about the drainage. So that's just what I'm sort of hearing, and I need to understand what other members might be hearing, or if the applicant thinks something different.
To rephrase, what are the planning issues that we need to talk about?
Thank you. Sorry, I've had a long day.
And what planning issues do we need? Comments from somebody who knows what they're talking about, which could be Scott instead of us, before we can decide, or what planning issues can we just delegate to him to address that?
Well, I can tell you, the Conservation Commission brought up the issue of providing access to the back, and they were gracious enough to do that, and we appreciate that, because at least it brings us that far back onto the property. Doesn't bring us all the way, and they'll put a gate there, but
This is not public access, it's police and fire
Right.
access.
right, with a gate at the end.
So does that mean the general public will not be driving their vehicles down there to park at the gate and
That's
walk
not the
down?
intent.
Well, they're
No.
not supposed
Do
to.
they do it now?
Of course, yes, sure they do.
Nick, do they drive down there now with their vehicles?
My understanding is there has been vehicles cited.
Right, so you're gonna be stopping that.
That is the directive, yes.
The current gravel way that meanders under the power lines is within the rectangle that's going to be built.
So you mentioned you're gonna be putting a septic system in and a well. What's the purpose of that?
You know, I'm going to defer to Natasha to some extent for that. It's not typical. There are 3 substations that I'm aware of that have them. 2 of them are the substations that are in Londonderry, and the other one, I believe, is in Berlin. It was identified as a project need here. I'm not sure if that was because of the adjacent use of the pole yard, that they thought this was a necessity to have a bathroom here.
It seems like, well, Eversource is now trying to provide bathrooms to new substations. So being that this is a new substation,
There'll be something moving forward, new
yeah,
substations will be
right.
equipped with them.
they do have to meet a certain criteria, so we're trying to provide bathrooms to a new substation.
So how far is the property line from the current sewer line?
Actually, I can tell you that exactly. It is on the other side of Mast Road. I know this was one of the comments previously from the town, was to make sure we didn't stick a big pole in your guys' sewer easement. So from the property line, we are located, here's the sewer manhole. It's approximately 100 to 120 feet on the opposite side of the road on land that is owned by the town of Goffstown.
Doesn't the sewer line run under the rail trail on your side of the road?
It runs in parallel with it on the so here. It's easier to analyze this. So here's the rail trail, here's the sewer. They almost run in parallel with each other. Here's Mass Road. It does cross at this point, so
So it is,
The sewer line and the rail trail correspond with each other.
yeah. So here's the rail trail, here's the sewer line, here's the property line. So it's essentially running.
so
in
at
parallel.
some point, where is the sewer line closest to your property line?
At that closest location, it is between 55 and 60 feet, looks like.
Okay. You will have to go to the sewer commissioner and ask for a waiver,
We do understand that.
okay? Because of the sewer commission regulation, anything within, I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the 100-foot range. You
I
have to
think
hook up
it's
to the
within
sewer.
300 feet, right?
There's a number out there, but there is a waiver process that you can apply for a waiver, if you can prove a hardship.
Understood. If this is appropriate for this evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for other board members?
Do we act on things or do we?
No, I gotta open the public hearing first.
Nope.
All right, so you don't have to move. If we have no one in the, if someone wants to speak at the public hearing, then I'll ask you to move. So at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody in the gallery that wishes to speak tonight at the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Board members.
So Nick just submitted another waiver
You don't like verbally?
Nope, it's written out.
written.
I know
Appendix,
the procedure, if it's not written, it doesn't count. So if it is appropriate to the board, we have submitted just now a waiver to allow an infiltration basin versus a bioretention area, based off of the rationale that we have existing rapidly infiltrating soils, and that they would be amended in accordance with DES requirements. We believe that granting this waiver request is appropriate to carry out the intent and purpose of the regulations and would not result in an adverse impact on the environment, public health, public safety, or abutting properties.
I have a question.
And they're also asking for a landscaping waiver as well, right, Joanne?
yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead, please.
So is that the plan that you have in the AOT that you've submitted?
Yes.
Which is?
I'm sorry, the
Like-
infiltration
Yes, the
basin is in the alteration of terrain?
Yes, so the waiver request would be consistent with the plans as presented to the board.
Okay. Scott, did you have comment on that?
There's great soil out there. I don't think this is an issue. It's just in our regs, and that's why I brought it up. So I think it was, when we moved through the whole MS4 process, they want requirements for green stormwater infrastructure, and so we added pieces to the regs for that. I believe that's what this stemmed from. This is back in 2015 when that may have been added. I guess maybe it was added before. I could be speaking out of terms, but infiltration practices are great. I mean, it's groundwater recharge. There's no outfall. It's good. So.
Question, can we say then, with the existing soil conditions, that the infiltration thingy, I don't know what the basin, will perform as would a bioretention basin, and the same effect for all the things that Scott just listed? Can the applicant make that representation then?
He makes that representation.
So Joanne, should we consider the conditional use permit before the waivers, or is there an order we should consider these requests?
I think typically you do the waivers first.
Okay, all right, so we'll stay on waivers for now. We're looking for some motions, if people are inclined.
I will move, showing my deep knowledge of this subject, that we waive the requirement for a bioretention thingy, from the blank colors,
And accept the infiltration
Yeah,
basin
yeah.
instead.
on basis of the applicant's representation as confirmed by the town engineer that the, that what?
Infiltration basin will function appropriately.
Thank you.
Why'd you make the motion if you don't know what you're talking about?
Because nobody else was.
I'll
His
second
assertiveness.
it.
We're gonna-
Lawyer, that's
We're gonna sit and stare at each other
Well,
infinitely.
never mind, I'm not going there. All right, so who seconded
second.
it? Kimberly?
Yes.
Why don't we switch it, that Kimberly made a motion, I seconded it.
So Kimberly made a motion and Jim seconded it to grant the waiver for the application to change their bioretention to infiltration basin. Any discussion on the waiver motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, waiver passes. Okay, the other waiver request is for Appendix F, landscape and screening standards. Do we need to discuss this? To permit an alternative landscaping design, which they have presented, which is their 91 6-foot-high western arborvitae.
Make a motion.
Yeah, I'll move that, well, okay. I think
He
we
knows
should.
about bushes. So he can-
Yeah, no, yeah, because Tim's and my wife just graduated from the.
Oh, they're master gardeners
class, so I've heard all about this, more than I want to know. I think we have to know, it's on the basis of the existing vegetation, the proposed vegetation, and the fact that because of the location of the overhead wires, the requirements of landscaping in that area would provide both practical and safety issues.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jim's made the motion to grant the waiver for the landscaping screening standards, and Kimberly has seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion passes. While we're talking about the landscaping, Nick, you stated at a prior meeting in your conceptual approach, I asked about some sort of a fencing or opaque fencing that would screen the open areas that are not going to be landscaped. And you told us that
Slatting or
you
something.
possibly, I asked about chain link fence that had the slats in it. You said had to be replaced or you said
Combination of our cold temperatures in New England, they crack and they become a bit unsightly, but also vandalism. The
Do you have any other
Messers-
proposals for screening in that open area that would be fixed as opposed to just the wide open spaces looking at the substation?
Is there an alternative landscape arrangement that we could provide in that area? Is that the
I'm
question?
asking you the question.
The preference in all honesty is no. Putting landscaping directly underneath high transmission lines is not advisable for the safety of the employees who have to maintain those lines, or in all honesty, the integrity of the lines themselves. You know, that area itself will also be maintained in accordance with Eversource's vegetative maintenance standards, which are essentially a state handbook at this point, as to how they're supposed to maintain those transmission lines. Vegetation, I believe, is allowed to grow to a height of no more than 3 feet before it's removed, and depends on the cycle, typically in the range of 4 years.
Yeah, if it's on the right of way. Well, it depends, yeah. But there's a side.
It's a little bit of a
not on the
blanket
right of way,
statement,
yeah.
but in general. So I think both the preference for the public utility, as well as it provides some level of sightline for police and fire as well into the substation, that it provides dual benefit in that regard.
Yeah. I'll bring it up again.
Yes, sir.
I agree, we don't need another fence for someone to spray paint.
Yeah, I mean, it's an electrical station, wires all over the place, not vegetation growing up under there.
Any other board members have questions for the applicants?
Do you want to discuss this conditional use permit?
Well, we're making our way down that street. So Joanne, could you please explain the need for the conditional use permit, so everybody understands?
Sure. The conditional use permit is needed, why am I finding it here? It's because of the closeness to the surface water. The buffer itself is 100 feet, and the conditional use permit is required for any intrusion into that buffer. Their letter from May 20th outlining the answers to the criteria for the conditional use permit can be found in the little packet for this application, separate from the comments.
Okay, board members, discussion on the conditional use permit.
Mr. Chair,
David?
I've got a question, probably not related to what you just asked. Nick, substantial land clearing has already occurred, but I noticed on a walkthrough 3 days ago, what you call the infiltration station area hasn't been land cleared yet.
That's fair.
But what has been cleared, all the trunks are pushed up to the tree line and stacked. Are all those trunks the environmentally correct way of leaving them just there, or are they going to be removed?
I feel like that may be a bit of a question you know the answer to, but relative to the construction that is proposed, we won't be leaving tree trunks or deleterious material. If anything, as part of the substation project, provides the opportunity for some cleanup.
Thank you.
I assume you left them there for the public to take. Aren't they going to disappear?
If that helps this proceed, then sure.
No.
Relative to why those, I would be guessing, in all honesty, folks, why those were left there. But I can say that as part of this project, we'll have the opportunity to clean it up.
Good, grind them up, get rid of them.
Yep.
It's all pine anyway.
If I'm looking at the applicant's conditional use permit, and it's described as 44 square feet of impact on the construction, temporary, and 8 square feet, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's it?
Yeah.
And it's actually less than that, it's 44 total. 36
Oh, I see,
is
yeah. Now
for
that
temporary structures, and 8 is actually for the permanent.
We-
So in this case, we're actually removing structures from the 100-foot buffer and placing them further outside of it.
Make a motion that we grant the conditional use permit based on the answers provided by the applicant to 15.4, 4.4.1 through 15.4.1.4.6.
And we make the findings outlined in the report. If we have to make actually findings.
Oh, we have to make the findings.
Yeah, so we just did. The
Gotcha.
motion's granted.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting conditional use permit, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Conditional use permit has been granted. Any other outstanding issues before the board? Joanne?
I don't believe so, just the remaining items that are outstanding. I don't
And
know
are
if you
they,
want to hear from Scott, he has some items listed.
Scott, do you wish to speak on the matter, or are you going to hang out? You're welcome to get up if you have comments you'd like to have entered into the record.
So Nick mentioned that I'm not familiar with what they do for drainage in these
You guys can stay there, just come on
substations. I can
around.
grab a regular.
Plenty of extra chairs.
I guess that was an assumption, so if
So,
I'm
no,
incorrect, my apologies.
No, you're correct. I'm not familiar with drainage at substations. I just reviewed it as a site plan, so I looked at our regs and I found discrepancies from our regs to how the drainage was modeled and the pipe size and the slope of the pipe. And I made comment on that, so I'm curious to know, and I don't know if that needs to happen here, but I'd like to hear Nick's rationale, and then I'd even like to think about it a little before I even make my decision on it after
That's-
speaking with you.
yeah, of
So
course.
I don't think that's gonna happen here tonight, like I just said, so. The infiltration basin thing has obviously been addressed. Other comments were pretty basic. I mean, you do still need to gain access, an access road to the infiltration basin, no matter what type of basin it is.
Yeah, I think we've got a good solution. So
Okay.
if I can just I'll be brief with the comments. So because we've done Rimmon Substation, because we've done Pinardville Substation, we had the opportunity with your prior engineer to work through a lot of these items. In regards to the town's requirement, culverts versus pipes, drainage pipes. So minimum pipe culvert sizes, 12 inches for driveways, 18 inches for roadways. What we propose within the substation yard itself is a system of under drains. So we were able to come to consensus that that doesn't apply necessarily to this component. And just for the boards, we've already had a chance to say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. So it's a little premature, so I'm sorry we have to do it in front of the whole board.
That's no problem.
But we were going to have the opportunity to sit down and work through these items. Relative to the commentary for detention and retention facilities, that's one of the areas in which the requirement for a 10-foot wide gravel road is to be located. From a definition standpoint, we're neither a detention or a retention facility. We note that bioretention areas, which are noted elsewhere within the requirements, the standard to have a 10-foot access way to them has not been required historically. In that we are proposing an infiltration that is neither detention or retention, and the terminology essentially is detention and retention facilities. It's to hold the water indefinitely until it can ultimately overflow and discharge, versus an infiltration system or a filtration system based off of the alteration of terrain requirements that is essentially infiltrating stormwater. A bioretention area is a filtration system when you apply for application with the state. So when we do our best management practice worksheet, that's the worksheet we're filling out when we do a bioretention area. Now, to Scott's point, would it be wise for us to have a better access to it? Yeah, and then we'll incorporate that.
Yeah.
I think that was something that when we cited our berm, we weren't mindful of that element, and by sliding that berm 10 feet, it provides the necessary access, so that way that there is the ability to access that better for future maintenance. That was a well-made point. The other items that are listed, I think, are all items that are either something that TF Moran can improve upon, to meet Scott's expectations, or it's an item that we can review and discuss and figure out whether or not it's applicable to this project, something like size of culverts. I bring that up specifically because our under drain discharge, which is not a under drain, is a culvert at that point, is 12 inches, and we acknowledge that that does need to be of that size. So I think we'll have the chance to work through all of these. If the board has a comfort level that to act on this application tonight, such that we meet all comments from town staff and the town engineer, we'd be perfectly happy with that. And if there was something we weren't able to resolve, we'd be back before you to chat about it. But I have confidence that we can work through any of those items.
Scott, are you confident that these could be handled administratively between you and the applicant?
Do you mind if I read through them once quickly before
Yeah.
I do that? Just to
Well, I
refresh my
made
head.
an assumption they had provided you with something prior to the meeting.
No, we've had a discussion that I am going to get basically a formal response to these. I will have some time to review the formal response, and then he and I will either meet in person or Teams or, you know, some manner to discuss. But I mean, I
We
would
certainly
just
don't
like
mean to put you on the spot,
see
so-
No, we
I
can
apologize.
halt the discussion right now until you have a chance to review it. Tim?
Yeah, just because my preference is that I don't want to put too much obligation on Scott without knowing what all the issues are. I think it should come back before us, even if it is only to confirm that they've reached a resolution.
Sounds good?
Can we
I'd be
add,
comfortable with that too, actually. I think.
How much time would you would be a 2-week period, or do you? I mean, for the next meeting in 2 weeks, or a month out?
I don't know whether it needs to be, it depends on how quickly.
I was planning to have that draft to you, if not tomorrow, on Monday.
Okay.
Just so that we could talk through to make sure, hey, are we on the same page?
Yeah.
And if there was something that was going to require further action by the board, whether it was a waiver or a significant design change, then at that point, we'd have the opportunity to discuss it.
Whatever you're comfortable with, Scott, you let us know.
I'm comfortable with the next meeting because what will ultimately come out of our discussion isn't going to be changes to the plan or the design. It'll be, I may have further comment that I'd like
Fine.
you to hear, or so
It's all good.
I don't have a problem with it moving to the next.
But there are plan revisions, we need to see them. It's a tight schedule. There are changes.
Well, I don't know we're gonna see them as board members. We're relying on Scott's professional opinion, and he's gonna relay that to us at a meeting. Would that be adequate, Jim?
We don't know if they are yet.
Yeah, that's just, I guess, if we don't know if there are plan revisions, then they just may not be updated by that point, I guess, I don't.
All right. Barbie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, the applicant, again, this is a great application, but I'm reluctant to leave staff reviewing things that they're sort of seeing and dealing with for the first time, because we don't really know where it's going to go. I want to make sure everybody has enough plan. I understand the applicant is waiting for other approvals too, so I don't know how quickly the state is processing things, and I would not venture a guess. But I would be surprised if we ended up being the final holdup based on this application.
We take
and-
no issue with waiting for another meeting. If anything, it'd be a great opportunity for just us to go over some of those items and make sure everybody has a comfort level. There's no reason to rush this.
All right, and then, so I sort of need to hear whether it's realistic for the next meeting or the weekend after that. But I do also, and sort of flipping gears here, 6 and 7 talk about lighting and structures being shown on the plan.
I don't think those are applicable either.
Well, I want to know that before you all go into discussions with the expectations we're going to see final.
I thought those were.
Those were the ones we struck.
No, I thought we struck starting at 8.
I had suggested we start at 6, but I wasn't overly vocal about it.
Let's see what I crossed out. I started at 8 when I started crossing
Oh, so
things out.
that's-
Well, because the 6 and 7 were particular to this plan, but I think the applicant is saying they don't think they are this way. I'm hearing.
Yeah, these sound like these were backed up from the other one as well.
No,
Well,
200 feet of the site?
if they're
Oh,
not
maybe
doing
it
any
was.
lighting, they don't need to
Maybe it was.
do 6, but I wouldn't strike 7.
Well, they do have another structure on the site, and is that shown on the plan? The one that's physically there now for the present substation?
It's
Right.
on the plan.
I believe it is, but what's not actually shown is all the apparatus within the fencing. I don't know if that matters, does it?
Of the current substation?
Yeah.
That'd be a little hard to just,
Oh, yeah.
to draw because you
Yeah.
have enough pencils.
It's fair.
I just didn't know if they were considered structures, if we're getting that.
If it's got a roof on it and a door and a window on it, then it's probably a structure.
Okay.
I'm going to move that we continue this for a month, and it sounds like 2 weeks is tight. If the applicant is agreeable to that, it gives time for Scott and Nick to arm wrestle.
So July 4th, 14th?
That would be the 14th.
Mr. Chair and Board, if we may, relative to the things that have been laid out before you, since the way in which I'm hearing this is we're continuing it so we can work out some of the drainage issues, is the condition that we've requested agreeable to the board? I would just hate to come back to the next meeting and we reopen that dialogue.
About what?
Relative to the condition that we come back to you in 2 years for how the existing
Oh, okay.
rail substation will be
Yes.
used. I just want to make sure that our only outstanding item is in fact the drainage elements, if that's agreeable.
I'm curious why they want to bind themselves to 2 years. What do we care if
Yeah,
you need more time?
why are we bringing that in?
I think they're asking that the board agree that that location will be used as pole storage.
Subject to our review of
In
the
2
site.
years.
Correct.
Right.
Instead of trying to show you how that area would be defined now, which we don't have that information.
And avoid another full-scale application?
Yeah, we would come back to you in 2 years, and if we need to do it as a site plan amendment, or however you thought was most
Yeah,
appropriate,
could be an
that
amendment.
way you get another bite at the apple as to what that area looks
So,
like.
so what we're essentially doing is vesting the use by approving it now, on condition that they come in within 2 years
Which would be before that area starts to be used as
with
that.
an amended site plan to show the actual use. Do that. What I don't want to do then is, say you can use this, for them to come back 20 years from now and say you guys approved it when zoning has changed, but if 2 years, I think it's okay.
That's why it's within the duration of the project.
I think that's reasonable.
Thank you.
If you-
David?
Chair, I'm back on stormwater drainage in the infiltration basin. Scott, when you review item 20, emergency spillway,
Yes.
20 is currently worded, is there a concern because that spillway is directed towards the rail trail? That's not, there's something else in between. The state has a 30-foot right-of-way.
Yeah, so
And
it's actually
so-
directed to the 30-foot right-of-way of the states, not
Yes, not the
before
rail
it goes to
trail.
the rail trail.
Conceivably, some future use of that state parcel would have a 2-lane highway through there.
Mhm.
And so I'm taking consideration a spillway 10 feet from a future road.
Yeah, that may even be a bigger issue than to the rail trail, because in a 100-year storm or some
I
crazy storm
bring that
event,
to you
there's
when you
probably
do-
not going to be anyone on the rail trail, so.
I mean, I think the reality of it is, no matter where the emergency spillway is, the likelihood that it's gonna see a drop of water go through it is nil, at best.
We say that, but we have 100-year storms all the time now.
And we've got, come on, we've got free draining, rapidly draining
Yeah.
sands and gravels out
Yeah,
here.
we-
that-
As long as that free raining gravel is exposed. If the overflow is gonna flow onto the vegetative mat on the forest floor, it's not gonna absorb at all. It's gonna flow until it finds
Shouldn't
a new home.
that 20, we don't have to beat it, is for Scott to review the location of the
that's
emergency
fine,
spillway?
that's
Just a
fine.
more general statement.
Yeah.
All right.
I move that we continue this, having
7:14.
granted the waivers and indicating that the 2-year for the,
Second,
that's probably,
second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to continue this to 7:14 with the request for the 2-year return date for the pole yard plan, if you want to call it that. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, passes unanimously. Joanne, is any other business for the board tonight?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, motion?
I will speak in Bill's behalf. Motion to adjourn.
Made by Barbara, seconded by
Second.
Hollis. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion? Okay, passes.
Joanne and